You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Jeff Lenard. I'm with NACS.
And I'm Carolyn Schnare, also with NACS.
So today we have the guy from Dirty Jobs. We're going to talk about jobs. We're going to talk about careers. And we'll probably go off color quite a bit.
Oh, come on now. I was assured this would be somewhere between G and PG-13.
I need to introduce you first.
Okay, go ahead.
After the break.
You have breaks? You have music and breaks. This is amazing.
And we're back with Mike Rowe.
Hello, Jeff.
Welcome.
Hello, Carolyn. How are you?
I'm doing very well today.
Good. So
we talked today at the NACS show, and there was an interesting story about an interesting career, and it changed your life. It's too long to repeat, and maybe we'd have to get that explicit warning on the podcast.
Oh, no.
So we don't want to do any of that. But really what that story talked about is like jobs have value, jobs matter, and that you really like talking about the connective tissue between how something gets from somewhere to that person. And all the people involved in that.
Yeah. You know, we talked about it last night briefly when I described the difference between tile and grout, right? Mm-hmm. You know, tile is impossible to miss. You look at a wall, you see the tile, you go, that's a tile wall. But without the grout between the tiles, the wall falls down. So Dirty Jobs, and most of my career really has been spent tapping the country on the shoulder in one way or another and saying, hey, don't forget the grout over here. Look at the grout over there. Get a load of him. Wait till you meet her. Because the number of people who are doing things that are out of the limelight or the spotlight is obviously huge. But the number of those people who are actually satisfied in their work and engaged in their work, that to me is a lesson that you can't learn too many times, and it's one that you can share in 1,000 different ways, because you might run out of jobs, but you'll never run out of people, and they're either satisfied or they're not. So sure, the dignity of work is one thing, but the enthusiasm for the work, the level of satisfaction that's out there in the country today, that's something we can control, and I think we should.
Do you think some people confuse jobs with a career? And that maybe, if I'm working here and I'm a dishwasher, I don't want to be washing dishes for 40 years, but there's something to be learned from dishwashing or some other career, or some other job, I should say. Yeah,
look, I think it's a terrible confusion, and I think we exacerbate it in a lot of ways, unintentionally, you know, and I know this isn't it's certainly not a political, it's not a political podcast, is it?
Nope.
Okay.
I guess it is now.
Well, it can be.
You know what, though? This is not really a political statement. It's more about the unintended consequences. Look at minimum wage as a for instance. You know, everybody on both sides wants people to be able to earn an honest living who work hard and put in the time. But if you look at the trajectory of your career like a ladder, then there are going to be rungs that are higher than others. The bottom rungs are the most important rungs. And when you do things to make those rungs less available to more people, then you create all kinds of difficulty for people who want to climb the ladder. So to answer your question, you know, washing dishes or flipping burgers or making fries, or, you know, there are 1,000 jobs that have tremendous dignity and importance because they lead to the next one. And if we treat every single job like a career, then I think we're just off the reservation. The better word, somewhere between job and career, is probably opportunity. All jobs are opportunities. All careers are certainly opportunities.
Learning opportunities, growth opportunity, whatever you want to put before opportunity, they're all opportunities.
Even the old word freelancer, right? I mean, that to me needs to come back in vogue. Do you know what it means, actually? Like where it came from?
No.
Some probably stabbing.
Close, actually. But it does involve a lance. But a free lance was a knight in olden times, a mercenary who served no king, but whose lance was for sale. And so, you know, you could call them jobbers. You know, I met a lot of...
That's what we do in our industry.
They're jobbers.
Yeah.
Right? And so And so to look at a jobber and to relegate that mentality or that person into some kind of subordinate position, that's crazy. But that's what we've done. We've elevated careers at the expense of jobs. We've elevated certain forms of education at the expense of others. And so you wind up in this world where a 2-year degree or a trade school or an apprenticeship program, these things wind up becoming subordinate to a 4-year degree, right? And there's no sensible reason for that. That's a choice that we've made. But in so many ways, we make the same choice over and over, promoting one thing at the expense of another. That's, what's the word? Stupid.
Well, yeah, so the convenience industry, there's multitude of careers within it, and I know we talked a little bit about it. I mean, you have a cashier that starts, it might be a part-time job. It's perfect for a spouse of a military member who moves around a lot, for students, but it's an opportunity, as you mentioned, to continue to move up. And I think our industry sometimes people don't think of it as a starting point or as a full career. And I think that just in some of the words you said today, that it can be and it should be. And it's more than a job.
And it is. And look, I think your industry, I think every industry that I've had a chance to really interact with can do a better job of telling their own story. It's really hard to do. You know, it doesn't matter how well you do it. It's hard because, you know, I've worked with Caterpillar over the years, a terrific company. But when it comes to really talking about the opportunities that exist within CAT, they're not the best ones to do it. They need somebody else from the outside to make the case. And more often than not, the most persuasive people are the employees themselves, sometimes the customers. But, you know, to be able to show a kid who's trying to figure out what to do with the rest of her life or his, to be able to show them, here's the route. All right, it started as a cashier, or it started as a dishwasher, or it started, right? It's where it starts is absolutely as important as where it finishes if you're trying to get an honest measure of what this career might be like, you know? So, yeah, I mean, how many people own stores in your industry, in your organization, who started as a cashier?
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty simple question. It must have an actual...
There are a couple.
There have to be.
They're not coming to my head right now, but I've heard of...
Well, there's about 100,000. There's 155,000 convenience stores in the country, and about 100,000 are owned by somebody with 1, 2, or 3 stores. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about 100,000 entrepreneurs. Oftentimes, they started as a cashier or as a small business somewhere else, built up enough capital, and went on their way. So I would assume, related to this, on dirty jobs, most of the places you visited were family businesses, just like most of our industry is family businesses. And I know you mentioned Caterpillar, but with family businesses, do you see something a little different whether the camera's on or whether the camera's off in terms of realness, or is it just a little bit, you see a little bit, you're part of the family when you're there filming?
There's an undeniable difference. In fact, the difference is so stark that by the 3rd season, we actually did a special called Dirty DNA. And what I wanted to do was look back at all of the episodes we'd done and isolate the ones that turned out to be family businesses. And this is interesting because we didn't set out to do a show about family businesses. I didn't really care. We didn't set out to do a show about anything other than profile real people doing real jobs. It just happened to be that family-run businesses were way more welcoming to a TV show called Dirty Jobs, right? I mean, if I'm going to go on a farm with a camera crew, there's a huge amount of trust that has to happen, especially in the reality TV world.
There's a thresher involved. There's some things like that.
Chickens.
There's chickens. There's a lot of things that can go
Poop.
horribly wrong. So so if you're dealing with a corporate entity and HR and lawyers and actuarials, and they're all going to look at this and conclude very quickly.
No is an easy answer. Yeah.
No is easy. But I think families, by and large, some of them might be looking for a non-traditional marketing opportunity and correctly find it in a show like Dirty Jobs. But by and large, most of them are just sort of, I used to call it in on the joke. And I'm not even sure what I mean by that. Not a joke in a classic ha-ha sense, but there's a level of awareness and understanding among entrepreneurs, and in particular among entrepreneurs who keep it in the family. That's there, And yeah, I mean, we can talk about Caterpillar and Ford and a whole bunch of other Fortune 500 companies my foundation's worked with, but I also work right now with a company called the Pen Company of America, right? 4 generations of
Is this the pen that writes all over? I've heard this on your podcast.
Yeah, that's it.
I want to buy one.
Well, I mean, they reached out of nowhere. They don't have a marketing budget, but they're in Garwood, New Jersey. They make millions and millions of pens. They've been doing it for 4 generations. And one of the guys was a fan of the show and the podcast and just said, is there any way you would ever have any interest at all in talking about pens? And it was such a ridiculous question. We just laughed and said, well, I tell you what, send me some. And they were great. They make this indestructible marker. So we learned more, and they're up in Garwood, New Jersey. So we took a trip, and we went to see them, and I brought the crew, and we spent the day, and I met the family, and we created all these materials. And look, it's not charity, but it's really important to me to be able to do business with bellwether stocks and not forget where those bellwether stocks began. I mean, the Holt family started Caterpillar over 100 years ago. I know them. I've worked with them too. It's so yeah, there's nothing bad about big, and there's nothing suspicious about successful. It's just a mistake, in my view, though, to separate, again, where you wound up from where you started.
Well, everybody started out in our industry with one store.
Yep.
You build it from there.
Yep.
So speaking of starting out, I love the story of how the Mike Rowe Works Foundation began. Do you mind sharing that with us?
No,
or how you came up with the idea?
Well, it was really a kind of a slow burn. 2 things were happening. The first was Dirty Jobs had become a very big show on television, and I was out in the world promoting it and shooting it all of the time. And I wanted to be able to talk differently about the show as I promoted I think it was season 4. So beyond the exploding toilets and the misadventures and animal husbandry and all the things that made the show really fun to watch, there were some very large themes in the show. The dignity of work, the importance of skilled labor, delayed gratification, personal responsibility. I mean, if you really peel back the layers, the thing was sort of a love letter to libertarian work ethic, And so I wanted permission to be able to talk about some of the themes that had always been present in the show. And I got that permission when the economy crashed, because suddenly all of those things, work, labor, jobs, infrastructure, all of it was in the headlines. And a lot of reporters, I think, looked around, and there just weren't a lot of obvious people positioned in a way to weigh in. But I was. Doesn't mean I'm qualified. I'm not. It just meant that I was a guy who had done a couple hundred jobs at the time.
Right.
And so people thought it might be good for me to, have an opinion on the skills gap. So once that happened, I was able to promote Dirty Jobs through its themes instead of through its obvious visual content. And when that happened, people started to say, well, are you going to connect these dots? How could you do it? And what really are the dots that needed to be most connected? And the answer to that question was opportunity. Because everywhere I went on that show, even at the height of the recession, I was still seeing help wanted signs. So I knew that this trope, this bromide that was out in the world, the idea that, well, look, the only way to get 10 million people back to work is to come up with 10 million new jobs. That's not true. There was lots of opportunity.
Right.
It just wasn't politically comfortable to talk about. Because once you acknowledge the existence of a few million jobs at a time when tens of millions of people are unemployed, you have to ask the question, well, either what's wrong with those jobs or what's wrong with those people? Right. and neither question is really something people want to answer. But in a very general way, politically, I can tell where you lean based on based on the answer.
Right.
And so like we've fallen into this rut of sorts where half the country is explaining the existence of opportunity by saying the jobs are crappy, and the other half is explaining the existence of opportunity by saying the people are lazy. And the truth is it's neither. It's a lack of understanding about what the opportunities truly entail and really bad PR around those existing opportunities.
Right. I think I saw a quote from you where you said that colleges basically somewhere along the way got a PR firm essentially and said, go to college so you don't wind up like that guy.
Exactly.
And that just demeans a job. And part of that, I'm not blaming any specific college. I'm about to send some kids to college, so for the record. But it was something where it was make yourself look better by making somebody else look worse. And that kind of has led to a situation where some jobs really aren't that desirable.
Well, you can fill in the blank in your own industry, I'm sure. How many guidance counselors, how many parents say, look, if you don't do that, you're going to wind up, pushing a broom, running a cash register?
Right.
If right. So we've turned opportunity into a cautionary tale.
Yeah. And
right.
Yeah, it's true.
We've made it very binary.
Yeah.
Right. If you don't get a degree, this is going to happen.
Yeah. What are you going to do with your life?
That's
You're
right.
13.
Right. I was 18 when my guidance counselor really put the screws to me, and was like, look, you need to, it's James Madison or it's University of Maryland, and
Terp.
Yeah, well, I wound up at Towson, but you know my story. I told the guy straight up, Mr. Dunbar was his name.
Right.
I said, look, I don't have any money, and more importantly, I don't know what I want to do, because he was pushing the financial aid forms at me at the same time. So you sign here, it's easy. But the real issue was I just didn't know. I mean, you're 18 years old. You don't know. You're not supposed to know.
No.
And this working assumption that you should know, well, that's pressure. And the pressure from your peers is pressure. And the pressure from your mom and dad is pressure. And then when the guidance counselor, that's the final nail. So a lot of kids, not knowing what they want to do, will sign on the dotted line. And when people say to me, how did college get so expensive? And the answer is, how didn't it? I mean, we freed up unlimited amounts of money, and we told an entire generation if they didn't go, they were screwed. and we've not only convinced them of that, we've convinced ourselves, So I deal with this still all the time. Guidance counselors in Illinois will tell their kids straight up, if you don't go to school, you're going to wind up at the cat dealership turning a wrench. Well, I know guys at the cat dealership turning a wrench make $100,000 a year.
Right, and they probably love their job.
They certainly seem to.
They make tangible things that people use that make things work.
Yeah. We're sitting in a building that was built by those guys. I mean, this is all around us is the proof. There are no bad jobs.
So 300 jobs, 300 episodes roughly. I would assume after about episode 1, if not episode 1, you always brought gloves. That was part of the
hand sanitizer.
Yeah, and it's things like so. Well, maybe you want to explain that, but I was going to say, was there a point where you said, "I'm tired of taking gloves around. I tell good stories. Let's try another medium. Let's become the #1 short form podcast in the country. I can travel less." Maybe only take 1 shower a day. Was there a thought process that took you from TV to podcast, or did somebody say, hey, kind of a good voice for podcasts there, Mike?
Great
That's what they say about Jeff.
Yeah, great face for podcasts.
Voice, Jeff.
No, honestly, the road was very crooked, and it still is. I don't think one medium leads to the next. There's a theory that says it does. It's called the displacement theory, where they talk about how, the next bit of technology will replace whatever preceded it, But of course, the movies didn't destroy newspapers, and TV didn't destroy movies, and the internet didn't destroy it, et cetera. So the same is true, I think, with individuals and careers. I'm still in television. Dirty Jobs is still on, out of production.
Right.
Will it come back? It might, actually. I mean,
Do we have any news to announce?
We don't have any news to announce, except for the fact that not a day goes by where dozens of people don't stop me and say, why don't you bring it back? And a year ago, I would have said categorically, no. It's you don't crawl back in the ring, at this point. But the truth is, I shouldn't have. I was 42 when I did that show. I probably should have been 30, physically speaking. So it's not really about that. Dirty Jobs wasn't about the gloves. It wasn't about. It was about trying. So to go back into that dynamic today, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But nothing is. What's the book? The world is flat, or the world isn't flat. I don't remember.
It's one or the other.
It's one or the other.
Yeah, there's some people that think it is. So
careers aren't, right? I mean, it's not either or. Dirty Jobs at its heart was actually storytelling.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We just found the spectacle and pointed our cameras at something that most people didn't know about. But in the end, it's me tapping the country on the shoulder saying, hey, there's a guy I met and he's into Sulaks. And, his name's Steve, and he does a thing out of sight with a tool I've never seen before that allows a ship to pass into the lock and basically bring us the steel that allows us to drive the cars, et cetera, et cetera. It's those stories are still for sale. The podcast is, to your point, a much more civilized way to tell the story. But look, today if you have a story to tell, you have to reach people on as many platforms as you can. Mm-hmm. So the podcast space is interesting. TV is still obviously out there. The written word, social, is the big thing. Mm-hmm. That's changed everything.
And watching on Facebook with Returning the Favor. I mean, that's a totally different medium, totally different audience.
That show. But, it's funny. I mean, Returning the Favor, somebody's got to do it, and Dirty Jobs are all kind of, structurally the same show with a different title. Mm-hmm. I'm still on a plane. I'm still going to a place. I'm still introducing you to somebody you didn't know. We surprise people on Returning the Favor. We try to make you cry, with,
You have.
Thank you. And on Dirty Jobs, we try to make you cry too. Just
a different kind of tears.
Yeah.
How do you find those corporation or the organizations in need? Do they write to you? Do you find them?
Everything that I've done since the second season of Dirty Jobs is really viewers. It was hard back then because I didn't have a Facebook presence. I had a little chat room, but since the end of Dirty Jobs and Somebody's Got to Do It, and certainly Returning the Favor, all of that comes from fans of the show. My rule is simple, and part of it goes to managing expectations, but mostly it's just laziness. The viewer is the boss. The people we profile are the host. I'm the guest, and the ideas essentially don't come from me. So I don't do the programming. I don't do the production. I don't do the hosting anymore. I just kind of show up and hope somebody gives me the gloves.
Right.
That's where I thought you were going before. Did you get tired of showing up with your own gloves? The truth is, I don't show up with anything. Whether it's Dirty Jobs or any of them. I need to know enough information to get where I need to be. Mm-hmm. But the more I know about you, the person I'm going to be interviewing, the more I know about what's going to happen, then the more of a performance it becomes. Mm-hmm. And the more of a performance it becomes, then the more I should be compared to other performers who do scripted comedy, for instance. Well, I don't do that. Mm-hmm. So in order to keep it real and authentic, I have to be wildly uninformed.
I like the idea when you go to, and it's happened in art where we visit stores or do something like that, and they hand you the gloves. And the first reaction is, this is going to get fun. Mm-hmm. This is going to be interesting. I have no idea what's coming. They're really comfortable with it. And they're probably even more comfortable knowing I'm not comfortable.
Sure.
Jeff learned how to inflate a balloon at a balloon festival.
Yeah, they gave me a couple, and it's like, why do I need these? It's like, you're not going to have fingers if you don't have them. So
yeah, we filmed at the Quick Check Festival of Ballooning in New Jersey. And Quick Check's a store in New Jersey. And we filmed Ideas to Go, which is a video series that we produce. And so they put Jeff out there with gloves and balloons, and I'm glad you didn't blow away.
Yeah, by the way, if you've ever been in a hot air balloon, it's really, really, wear a hat.
It's loud.
Yeah.
It's loud. They're tough to shoot in. I shot in one a couple of years ago, and we actually landed by mistake in a field in outside of Ocala, Florida. And coincidentally, it wasn't a very good segment. It was frustrating. I mean, nice people and beautiful to look at, but hard to shoot. You're just in a basket and you're stuck, and it's loud. This field where we crash landed happened to be owned by a guy who ran a hang gliding business, a tandem hang gliding business. And his name was Malcolm, and he was interesting for, among other reasons, he hadn't worn shoes in 20 years. And this guy, he seemed kind of crazy.
But he wore gloves.
Kind of crazy.
He invented tandem hang gliding. So 20 minutes later, I'm strapped into this guy, and we've got our cameras on the bird, and we're being dragged up in the air behind a plane and then untethered and floating around. So I guess I'm telling you that because, you don't know where the wind's going to blow you when you're in a hot air balloon.
Right.
And if you don't land where you think you were headed, it might not be a bad thing. There might be a guy there who's willing to give you actually what you do need, which in my case was a better story, and we got it.
And
that sounds like an incredible metaphor for everything you just talked about.
Jobs,
Jobs,
your career.
Man, I should have talked about that to your people today.
We should have hit the
dragging us
record
to the
button.
sewer.
Did we hit the record button? We'll use that again.
Oh, we ready now?
It's time
Are
to
we
start.
rolling?
Oh,
Do we got speed?
Oh, dear.
So, are there any keywords as you tell stories for folks out there who want to tell stories, who want to think about how to tell stories, how to do it better? You do an exceptional job on your podcast. So first, let's plug the podcast.
Thank you.
We need to go listen to that the way I heard it. Mm-hmm. So, when you write these things, are there any keywords that you use to move things along? Is there like, this is always my go-to word, and this gets there, or I say it this way?
Well, the language is, I'm a big fan of it, and I don't talk down, and especially when I write. I'll use big fancy words. I'll also try and talk plainly and try and mix it all up, But no, I don't have any linguistic rules, but from a storytelling standpoint, I try not to start at the beginning.
Memento.
With respect to Once Upon a Time, it's a great way to get into it. But my podcast is different in that it is written first and foremost, and I did it that way because I was trying to pay a homage to Paul Harvey, to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm. Page 2.
Yeah, page 2, and of course the rest of the story.
Carolyn's not picking it up.
You don't remember Paul Harvey back in the 70s and 80s? Paul Harvey.
Good day.
I don't.
He had a segment called The Rest of the Story. And essentially, it was a story about a person you know. It's something you didn't know about a person you do. Now, you don't know who the person is until the end. Mm-hmm. So it's a mystery, and you kind of figure out as you go. I started there. It's kind of evolved into a broader thing. But first and foremost, it started as a narration exercise. I thought, everybody's podcasting. I should be out there. I narrate for a living, so it'd be cool to have my own podcast and narrate great stories. But it's really hard to find great stories. And modesty aside, if you want to pay somebody to write them, well, that's one way to go. But my own hubris doesn't really allow for that. So
it's harder to say words you didn't write.
It really is. I do it all the time. If it's a Deadliest Catch, I'm happy to say January, the Bering Sea. Suddenly.
In a world.
Right. Don LaFontaine coined that. Kind of a hero of mine. But no, the rules for talking are very different than the rules for writing. And combining them together is a neat trick.
So we couldn't get you to scoop that Dirty Jobs is coming back. But could you pitch convenience stores? And do you have a pitch for the convenience store industry that you can work in there? You don't have to necessarily put on gloves every day.
No, you could come work.
So what you're asking me to do is show up at a convenience store and do something.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Well,
if you reward work ethic, we might give you a scholarship.
That show
You
was
probably get free coffee.
No, don't tease. I'll do virtually anything for the free coffee. Look, if you're seriously asking, is there something I can do for convenience stores? You want to be on TV, or are you talking about the foundation?
Not me. I don't need to be on TV. But I think there's a story to tell. I think you get 165 million people a day, 24 hours a day. There's some interesting stories there.
Well, look, how many people right now, if your industry were to hire everyone they needed, right? If that were to magically happen tomorrow, how many people would be hired?
It depends. It's not what you need. It's can you keep them? Mm-hmm. And if you're looking at that turnover rate, that typical is in retail, you're looking at 100% annually. We have 2.5 million people working in the industry. Some manager level, the turnover is around 20, 30%. Some in back office, even less than that. But we're talking millions every year, millions of opportunities, as you've pointed out, to learn a little bit more about a business, take it with you, stay there, maybe go somewhere else. So I think it's one of those interesting stories. And I think it ties to everything you believe in. You believe in the value of a job, the value of a job well done, the value of giving back. And that's what our industry does with $1 billion a year in charity. I think we have something here.
You guys gave away $1 billion last year.
Our industry, $6,000 per store, times it by the number of stores, about $1.1 billion a year.
That's amazing.
Local charities, national charities, Girl Scout cookie booths, all those things happening out front.
You know what? Have you seen my sweat pledge?
Oh yeah, and you created it over a beer.
Yeah, and some wine actually.
Okay.
You know, like I said, it's not a binary choice, Jeff.
So they don't know what's in my brain, thankfully. Why don't you tell us about the Sweat Pledge?
The Sweat Pledge was just an attempt when we started to award scholarship money. We wanted to really attach it to work ethic. So work ethic scholarships became the primary thing that MicroWorks was going to do. And so how do you quantify work ethic? It's kind of impossible, but one of the ways to do it is just a straight up pledge. I mean, it worked for the Boy Scouts, it works for Skills USA, it works for Future Farmers of America, it works for the military, works for nuptials, marriages. I mean, it's a pledge.
Half of the time.
Half the time. Let's talk about turnover. And so the sweat stands for skills and work ethic aren't taboo. It's just a goofy acronym that struck me as funny one night after a bottle of wine. And then I thought, well, what would it be? And I was an Eagle Scout once upon a time, still am, I suppose. The Scout law has 12 tenets. I think most recovery programs have 12 steps. So, we're kind of talking about a recovery program here. We're talking about, in my view anyway, the country has a disconnect. It ought to recover from it. How are you going to do that? You're going to do it with work ethic. So I just wrote 12 simple statements, put it on the Sweat Pledge, and said, look, anybody who I give money to needs to at least convince me that they believe these fundamental things to be equally true. Because most of the money I was raising was coming from friends of the Facebook page and from partners in business. And so they had, a specific worldview. Again, not political, but a lot of the things in the Sweat Pledge, virtually all of them redound to either personal responsibility, some form of accountability, delayed gratification, and attitude. Mm-hmm. Those are the things.
Right.
And so there are 12 tenets, and each one checks one or more of those boxes. And, I printed it up on parchment, and now we've handed out many thousands of them.
Not 2 tablets.
Not 2 tablets.
Or 3.
No, just the one.
We talked to the president of one of the larger companies the other day, and he says that there are times we hire somebody, doesn't work out of position, but we're smart enough to know that that's still a good person. It's just not the right job, and we will find the right job for that person. And you can't teach work ethic, you can't teach attitude, you can teach skills.
But you can show it.
Yeah.
You can't teach it.
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
That's right. And so, look, we've always felt at MicroWorks that there are a lot of things I can say, and there are a lot of speeches, and there are a lot of pledges you can write, but in the end, you need to see the people who mastered the skill and prospered as a result. You need to meet them, and you need to know them. There's no substitute.
Well, and I think that our industry is so customer facing. It's happy people who like being around other people, who like to smile, who just want to help someone good morning in the morning, give them some coffee and make their day, right?
Mm-hmm. It doesn't take much.
It's just coffee.
Right. You're in and out in 3 minutes, by and large. You're probably late for wherever you have to go. You come in and you get out, and your day's going to be filled with disappointments and all sorts of things that aren't going to measure up to what you wanted. But if you can come in, get a smile, get a cup of coffee, get your bagel or whatever you need, and get out,
Go do the important things they must do.
Yeah.
Doctors.
Hassle-free.
Doctors and first responders and the guy who's pushing the broom.
Grout. You got to be without the grout. All the tiles.
It's all about the grout.
It's all about the grout. Yeah.
So, thank you for joining us today.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
You're known for dirty jobs, but you're known for so much more right now. Beyond that, you have the Micro Foundation, Micro Works Foundation.
That's it.
You have the Way I Heard It. I'm thinking of doing a podcast. Well, that's not the way I heard it, and come out like 2 days after yours, and see if I can glom onto your listeners.
That's the beauty of that podcast. I'm not claiming to be an authority. This is just the way I heard it. I could be wrong.
And returning the favor.
On Facebook, absolutely killing it. Season 4 coming up.
Well, thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.